All right, good morning, class. So this morning is our discussion for the cardiovascular system. I haven't bothered you for the past, I think, 4 days. So this November 3 will be the start of your going back to reality. So I will be sending this recording today. Hopefully, you will watch it also today for your quiz this coming November 6 for the MWF classes and for November 7 for my TTHS classes, right? So your cardiovascular system, it is composed of not only your heart, but also your blood and your blood vessels. Okay? By the way, before we start, the sources of my discussion is mainly from your module and of course the additional notes that I have sent. Only a few notes from Tortora which is also present in your module. Okay, so the first topic for our discussion is the heart. So we have dissected and you have all already seen the different parts of the heart. So this is just like a recap and then a summary of what we had, right? So the heart, it is relatively small. As we had in our discussion, the size of our heart is like our fist. It is roughly the same size as your closed fist. The heart rests on our diaphragm near the midline of your thoracic cavity, which it lies in the mediastinum, right? So if the question is what specific cavity or what specific space in our body that we can find our heart, the answer is mediastinum. So the next is the membrane that surrounds and protect our heart is our pericardium. You have seen the pericardium during our dissection. For some groups, it was not present. However, for some, there is still the pericardium. So the pericardium is the one that surrounds and protects your heart. So it consists of two main parts, your fibrous pericardium and the serous pericardium. The superficial fibrous pericardium is composed of tough, inelastic, dense, irregular connective tissue, and the deeper serous pericardium is thinner. It is more delicate and it forms a double layer around the heart. The inner is the visceral layer, which is called your epicardium. Between the parietal and your visceral layers of your serous pericardium is a thin film of lubricating serous fluid, which is slippery secretion of your pericardial cells. It is known as the pericardial fluid. So this pericardial fluid reduces friction between layers of the serous pericardium as the heart moves, alright? So that when the heart is pumping, it is not having too much friction with other parts. So the space that contains the few ml of your pericardial fluid is called your pericardial cavity. So again, your pericardial fluid is secreted by your pericardial cells in order to reduce friction between the layers of the serous pericardium as your heart pumps. And the space that contains this fluid is called your pericardial cavity. So as you can see in the picture, your pericardium has two layers, the visceral and the serous and the fibrous. Your serous is a double layer, right? You have a visceral and then you have a visceral, which is also called your epicardium. And between the layers of your serous is where you can find this fluid, which is termed as your pericardial fluid, secreted by your pericardial cells that is found in your pericardial cavity. Okay? All right, so next is the layers of the heart wall. The wall of the heart consists of three layers: your epicardium, which is the external layer, your myocardium, which is the middle, and the endocardium, which is your inner. The middle myocardium is responsible for pumping action of the heart and is composed of cardiac muscle tissue. It makes up approximately 95% of the heart wall. The myocardium muscle fibers are highly branched and attached by collagen connective tissue fibers, which link all the parts of the heart together. The innermost layer, which is the endocardium, is a thin layer of endothelium overlying a thin layer of connective tissue. It produces a smooth lining for the chambers of the heart and covers the valves of the heart. The smooth endothelial lining minimizes the surface friction as the blood passes through the heart. This layer is also continuous with the blood vessel lining. So your endocardium, sorry, it is a thin layer of endothelium overlying a thin layer of connective tissue, and it continues with the blood vessel lining. So it is found inside, it is smooth so that it will again avoid friction as blood passes through the heart. So for the anatomy of the heart is a hollow muscular organ that lies in the anterior medial area of your chest, posterior to the rib cage. It is made up of four chambers that are separated by a medial muscular wall, which is called your septum. Your septum separates left and right chambers, and also it is separated by your valves, which separates the superior and inferior chambers. So again, your four chambers are separated by two structures, your septum and your valve. Your septum, it separates left and right chambers, and your valve separates up and down or superior and inferior chambers. So the first chamber that we will going to be discussing is your right atrium, which is found here. When during the dissection, when we inserted our fingers in your superior vena cava, we proceeded in your right atrium, right? So your right atrium forms the right surface of the heart and receives deoxygenated blood. When we say deoxygenated blood, it doesn't have oxygen, right? So it receives deoxygenated blood from three veins, namely your superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and coronary sinus. Your blood passes from the right atrium into the right ventricle through a valve that is called your tricuspid valve. Tricuspid because it consists of three cups or leaflets. It is also called as your right atrioventricular valve. Okay, so the valves of the heart are composed of dense connective tissue that is covered by your endocardium. So again, your right atrium, it receives deoxygenated blood from your superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and your coronary sinus. It passes blood to your right ventricle by your tricuspid valve. Tricuspid because it contains three cusps or leaflets. Alright? So next. So next is your right ventricle. The thickness, which is here, sorry, here. The thickness and the form of your right ventricle forms the anterior surface of your heart. Okay, so the inside of the right ventricle contains a series of ridges that is formed by raised bundles of cardiac muscles, which is called your trabeculae carneae. So same lang here sa inyong left ventricle, it also contains trabeculae carneae. The blood passes, still this is deoxygenated, so it doesn't have oxygen. Your blood passes from the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve, so it will come out sa pulmonary valve um, into an artery called your pulmonary trunk or artery. So again, um, the blood will enter the superior, inferior, or your coronary sinus going to your right atrium. It will be passed to your right ventricle via your tricuspid valve, and then it will enter the pulmonary valve going out to your pulmonary trunk, or also known as your pulmonary artery. From there, it divides into the right and left pulmonary arteries, and it carries the deoxygenated blood to the lungs in order for it to pick up oxygen. Okay, so your deoxygenated blood exits your heart via your pulmonary artery, which is divided into right and left pulmonary artery. So the next chamber is your left atrium. It is about the same thickness as the right atrium and forms most of the base of the heart. So, di ba, we have located during the dissection that the base is on top, not on below. This is your apex, this is your base. Okay? So, it receives oxygenated blood from the lungs through your pulmonary veins. The blood passes from the left atrium going to your left ventricle using your bicuspid valve, or also known as your mitral valve, which, as its name implies, has two cusps. Right? So again, on this part of the chamber, or this chamber of the heart, left atrium, it already receives oxygenated blood with oxygen coming from your lungs through your pulmonary veins, right? And then it passes your blood going to the left ventricle through your bicuspid valve, or also known as your mitral valve. And then the last chamber of your heart is the left ventricle. It is the thickest chamber of the heart and forms the apex of the heart. So as you can see here, and then when we open the heart, you have seen that it has thick walls, right? The walls or the muscle fibers are very thick. The blood passes from the left ventricle through your aortic valve or your aortic semilunar valve into the ascending aorta. Some of the blood in the aorta flows into the coronary arteries, which branch from the ascending aorta and carry blood to the heart wall. The remainder of the blood passes into the arch of the aorta and then descending aorta, going to your thoracic aorta and abdominal aorta. Branches of the arch of the aorta and descending aorta carry blood throughout the body. So again, when blood enters to your pulmonary veins, oxygenated blood, it will go to your left atrium, going to your left ventricle using the bicuspid valve. And then from there, it will exit the heart through your aorta, going to the different parts of your body. Okay. So this is just a summary of what we have. So as you can see, left atrium, it carries oxygenated blood already. And then the left ventricle, also oxygenated blood going to your aorta. Right atrium, it will receive deoxygenated blood from this blood vessels, including your coronary sinus. And then it passes through your right ventricle using your tricuspid valve. Your right ventricle will pump the blood going out to the heart so that it will go to your lungs for it to become oxygenated. So the next topic is your cardiac cycle. Okay, so the heart is a double pump system. The left and right ventricles are surrounded by a large layer of your cardiac muscle, which allows the pumping mechanism of the heart to exist, right? And this pumping is known as your cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle occurs as the heart beats, pumping blood through a system of blood vessel that carries blood to every part of the body. The two phases of your cardiac cycle is known as the systole and the diastole. Your systole occurs when the heart contracts to pump blood out. The semilunar valves are open while the atrioventricular valves are closed. Your diastole occurs when the heart relaxes after contraction, in which your atrioventricular valves open while the semilunar valves close. So again, two phases, systole and diastole. Systole, when your heart contracts to pump out the blood, in which semilunar valves open, atrioventricular valves close. While for diastole, it happens when your heart relaxes, atrioventricular valves open, while your semilunar valves close. Okay? So our next topic is systemic and pulmonary circulation. The heart, again, is actually two pumps side by side. The right side of the heart receives oxygen poor blood from your body tissues and then pumps this blood going to the lungs to pick up oxygen and remove the carbon dioxide. And then the blood vessel that carry blood to and from the lungs are from the pulmonary circuit. The left side of the heart receives oxygenated blood, returning the blood from the lungs going into your heart, and then pumps this blood throughout the body to supply oxygen and nutrients to the body tissues. The blood vessels that carry to and from all body tissues are forming the systemic circuit. So blood leaving the aorta and flowing through the systemic arteries is a bright red color because it contains oxygen. And as it moves through capillaries, it loses some of its oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide. That's why the blood in your veins are dark red. So again, your pulmonary circuit is wait. Pulmonary circuit are the blood vessels that carry blood to and from the lungs. So the color from your arteries is color bright red because it contains oxygen. And then the blood naman or the systemic circuit are your blood vessels that carry blood to and from all body tissues are um, the color of the blood is dark red because it is unoxygenated but it has carbon dioxide. So after pulmonary and systemic circuit, we have coronary circulation. What is coronary circulation? Coronary your nutrients, they are not able to diffuse quickly enough from your blood into the chambers of the heart to supply all layers of cells that makes up the heart wall, because when that happens, then of course there will be a delay in pumping of the blood. For this reason, the myocardium has its own network of blood vessels, which we call your coronary circulation or cardiac circulation. It is composed of your coronary arteries. Two coronary arteries, the left and right coronary arteries, branch from the ascending aorta and supply oxygenated blood to your myocardium. The left coronary artery passes inferior to the left auricle and divides into the anterior interventricular and circumflex branches. The anterior interventricular branch or left anterior descending artery is in the anterior ventricular sulcus and supplies oxygenated blood to the walls of both ventricles. The circumflex branch lies in the coronary sulcus and distributes oxygenated blood to the walls of the left ventricle and left atrium. The right coronary artery supplies small branches to the right atrium, and it continues inferior to the right auricle and ultimately divides into the posterior interventricular and marginal branches. The posterior interventricular branch follows the posterior interventricular sulcus and supplies the walls of two ventricles with oxygenated blood. The marginal branch beyond the coronary sulcus runs along the right margin of the heart and transports oxygenated blood to the walls of your right ventricle. So after saying that so many names of the arteries, just know that your coronary circulation, its reason why it exists is for your myocardium or your heart to be supplied with oxygen, because it cannot be that the blood that is entering them will be the source, because if that happens, it will take a long time for them to reach the different cells, and then if that happens, of course there will be a delay in pumping of the blood, letting the person either be deprived of oxygen or deprived of blood supply. So in order for the heart to get supplied with oxygen, we have your coronary circulation that is made possible by your coronary arteries. Next, um, maybe some of you are wondering, yes, the blood is supplied by your coronary artery. Then how does this blood exits, or how does they go out from the blood? That is why we have your coronary sinus. After blood passes through the arteries of the coronary circulation, it flows into your capillaries where it delivers oxygen and nutrients to the heart muscles, and it collects the carbon dioxide and waste, and then it moves it to your coronary veins. Most of the deoxygenated blood from the myocardium drains into a large vascular sinus in the coronary sulcus on the posterior surface of the heart, which is called your coronary sinus. So again, the left and right coronary arteries, it delivers blood to the heart, while your coronary veins drains blood from the heart into the coronary sinus. So for your systemic circulation, the aorta is the largest artery of the body. It has four principal divisions, and it is the ascending aorta, arch of aorta, thoracic aorta, and abdominal aorta. The ascending aorta, which supplies blood to the heart, gives off two coronary arteries that supply the myocardium of the heart. Then the ascending aorta arches to the left, forming the arch of aorta, which supplies the head, neck, upper limb, and then the right and left upper limb. Sorry, right? This arch of aorta continues to descend, and it lies close to the vertebral bodies and is called your thoracic aorta. Your thoracic aorta supplies your pericardium, your lungs, esophagus, your mediastinum, your chest muscle, abdominal muscles, and superior and posterior surfaces of your diaphragm. So your thoracic aorta reaches the bottom of the thorax and it passes through the aortic hiatus of the diaphragm to become your abdominal aorta, which supplies your inferior surface of the diaphragm, your abdominal muscles, your liver, stomach, duodenum, and pancreas, your esophagus, what else? Your spleen, um, your kidneys, your adrenal glands also, and your testes, your ovaries for female, and then your colons, your rectum, your lower limbs, and your uterus. So there are again four um, branches or divisions of your aorta. So again, your aorta is the largest artery of the body. So your ascending aorta, it supplies your heart, your arch of aorta, upper, your head, neck, and then your limbs. Your thoracic aorta is supplies your pericardium, your lungs, your esophagus, mediastinum, your chest, and your abdominal, some of your abdominal muscles, and then the superior and posterior surface of your diaphragm. While your abdominal aorta, lower, it supplies your inferior surface of the diaphragm, abdominal muscles, your different organs in your abdomen, your kidneys, adrenal glands, testes for males, ovaries for females, your rectum, your lower limbs, and uterus, prostate, and muscles of your buttocks. So after your systemic circulation, which carries oxygenated blood, we have now your pulmonary circulation, which takes deoxygenated blood from your right ventricle to the alveoli within the lungs and returns the oxygenated blood from the alveoli to the left atrium. So one circulation that we must also be familiar with is your fetal circulation. It involves the exchange of material between your fetus and your mother. We all know that the baby, for it to survive, it needs nutrients from the mother, right? So how does it get these nutrients? By your fetal circulation. The fetus derives its oxygen and nutrients and eliminates its carbon dioxide and wastes through your maternal blood supply by means of a structure that is called your placenta. That is why your placenta is very, very important for babies or for fetus, right? The blood passes from the fetus to the placenta via two umbilical arteries and returns from the placenta via single umbilical vein. At birth, when your pulmonary, your digestive, and liver functions are already established, the special structures of your fetal circulation are no longer needed. The ductus arteriosus becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. The foramen ovale becomes the fossa ovalis. The ductus venosus becomes the ligamentum venosum after birth. The umbilical arteries also become the medial umbilical ligaments, and the umbilical vein becomes the ligamentum teres. So, before they if they are still in the womb, they get your nutrients from the mother, and then they excrete their waste via the maternal blood supply via your placenta. And then if they are already outside, the mother has already given birth, some of the different structures becomes ligaments in where because they already have their own supply. There are different diagnostic procedures for the heart. We have number one there, your electrophysiological testing. This is a procedure in which a catheter with an electrode is passed through the blood vessels and introduced into the heart. It is used to detect exact locations of abnormal electrical conduction pathways. Once an abnormal pathway is located, it can be destroyed by sending a current through the electrode, a procedure which is called your radiofrequency ablation. We also have electrocardiogram, um, or it is abbreviated as ECG or EKG. It is a recording of electrical signals. Your ECG is a composite record of action potential that is produced by all of the heart muscle fibers during each heartbeat. The instrument used to record the changes in is an electrocardiogram. So your electrocardiogram is a standard test to employ or to diagnose CAD. CAD is coronary artery disease. We have the third test, your stress testing. Stress test, what we do here is we check the functioning of the heart. We monitor it when it is placed under a physical stress by exercising or using a treadmill or an exercise bicycle or arm exercises. During the procedure, ECG recordings are monitored continuously and the blood pressure is monitored at intervals. When there's also a non-exercise stress test, which is a pharmacologic test. When we say pharmacologic, we use drugs or we use medicines. This test is used for individuals who cannot exercise due to conditions such as your arthritis. A medication is injected that stresses the heart to mimic the effects of exercise. And then, same procedure will happen. They will monitor it via ECG and then blood pressure monitoring. Next is your echocardiography. It allows the heart to be seen in motion and can be used to determine the size, the shape, the function of the chambers of the heart, the volume and velocity of blood pumped from the heart, and the status of the heart valves. The presence of birth defects and abnormalities also of the pericardium can be seen. Next is your electron beam computerized tomography, or abbreviated as EBCT. Your EBCT detects calcium deposits in coronary arteries. These calcium deposits are indicator of disease known as your atherosclerosis or thickening of the heart walls. Next is your coronary cardiac computed tomography radiography, or abbreviated as CCTA. This is a computer assisted It is a computer-assisted radiography procedure in which a contrast medium is injected into a vein and a beta blocker is given to decrease the heart rate. Then X-ray beams trace an arc around the heart and ultimately produce an image called a CCTA scan. This procedure is used primarily to detect blockages such as atherosclerotic plaques or also your calcium deposits. We also have your cardiac catheterization. It is an invasive procedure that is used to visualize the heart's chambers, its valves, and the great vessels in order to diagnose and treat diseases that are not related to abnormalities of the coronary arteries. The basic procedure involves inserting a long, flexible radiopaque catheter into a peripheral vein or a peripheral artery and guiding it under fluoroscopy. We also have coronary angiography. It is an invasive procedure used to obtain information about the coronary arteries. In the procedure, a catheter is inserted into the artery in the groin or wrist and threaded under fluoroscopy towards the heart and then into the coronary arteries. After the tip of the catheter is in place, a radiopaque contrast medium is injected into the coronary arteries. The radiographs of the arteries, called your angiograms, appear in motion in order to monitor, and the information is recorded on a videotape or in your computer disk. Coronary angiography may be used to visualize coronary arteries and to inject clot-dissolving drugs such as your streptokinase or tissue plasminogen activator, or your TPA, into a coronary artery to dissolve an obstructing thrombus. Alright, so when they place the catheter, they will tawag dito, they will push a um, a liquid or a fluid that fluoresces or mag-ilaw siya. And then when it stops at a certain point, then it means that it has a block. And then after that, of course, they can locate where the block is. They will now inject something that can dissolve the clot in order to avoid having surgeries where you will open the patient instead of just using na lang. So it is better for an angiography, your coronary angiography, because it is less invasive. You do not need to open the patient. You just need to um, inject drugs that can dissolve the clot, right? So next, your percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty, or your PTCA. It is another procedure. In one variation of this procedure, a balloon catheter is inserted into an artery of the arm or the leg and gently guided into the coronary artery. While a dye is released, your angiograms or your videotapes or the X-ray of the blood vessels are taken in order to locate where the plaque is or where the obstruction is. Next, the catheter is advanced to the point where the obstruction is, and then a balloon-like device will be inflated with air in order to squash the plaque against the blood vessel wall, leading to more open, um, mo- um, wherein it will lead in opening or squishing the clot in order to be flattened. Okay, so that is your percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty or your PTCA. We have what we call your acute coronary syndrome. In worst case scenarios, your coronary artery disease or your CAD will progress to acute coronary syndrome. This is a term used to describe a range of conditions associated with sudden reduced blood flow to the heart. One condition is your heart attack, or in medical terms, your myocardial infarction. This is when the cell death results in damage or destroyed heart tissues due to prolonged lack of oxygen supply or your ischemia. Because, in heart attack, there will be a blockage. Mabablock yung daanan ng ating blood because of calcium deposits or fat deposits, and then parts of the heart will not be supplied with blood anymore, therefore leading to no nutrients, no oxygen supply, leading to the death of the muscles, therefore producing different conditions under your acute coronary syndrome. Our next topic is your blood vessels. Your blood vessels contribute to homeostasis by providing the structure for the flow of blood and to and from the heart, and also the exchange of nutrients and waste in the tissues. They also play an important role in adjusting the velocity and volume of blood flow in the different parts of our body. Your blood circulates throughout the body within a closed system through or what we call your blood vessels. Your blood vessels are tube-like structures that are capable of expanding or contracting, or what we have your vasodilate or vasoconstrict. And there are three common types or three major types of your blood vessels. We have your capillaries, your arteries, and your veins. Your arteries, they carry blood away from the heart to the organs, and when a person is dead, your arteries are empty because all the blood are drained. Large elastic arteries leave the heart and then divide into medium-sized muscular arteries that branch out into various regions of the body. Medium-sized arteries then divide into smaller arteries, which in turn divide into still smaller arteries, what we call your arterioles. As the arterioles enter a tissue, they branch into numerous tiny vessels that is called your capillaries. And then these capillaries, they are thin-walled. They allow exchange of substances between blood and body tissues because they are thin-walled. Groups of capillaries within the tissue will reunite to form small vein, which is called your venules, then in turn will merge to form progressively large blood vessels, which we call your veins. Your veins are the blood vessels that convey blood from the tissues going back to the heart. So again, your arteries will branch out to become smaller, which is your arterioles, and then they will branch small into more smaller vessels, which is your capillaries. Your capillaries will branch together. They will combine together to form your venules, and your venules will combine together again to create more larger veins, which is what we call your veins. And your veins, its function is to supply blood going back to the heart, your arteries away from the heart, your capillaries for exchange of materials in your tissues. So we have the three layers of your blood vessel wall: tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica externa. Tunica intima is the innermost layer. It is comprised of a single layer of endothelial cells. Your tunica media, which is found in the middle, is comprised of smooth muscle cells, elastic, and connective tissues. The layer is much thicker in arteries, and veins have fewer elastic fibers. Your tunica media is responsible for the ability of your blood vessel to vasoconstrict or to vasodilate. The tunica externa, or the outermost layer, also known as your tunica adventitia, is composed entirely of connective fibers and is surrounded by an external elastic lamina which functions to anchor blood vessels. It's just a microscopic examination of our blood vessels. As you can see here on the first image, this is an artery. We also have here a vein. As you can see, the tunica interna is more thicker in your arteries and thinner in your veins. This is also your capillaries. So as you can see in your capillaries, they are thin walled. That's why you can easily see the red blood cells inside. This thin walls of your capillaries allows them or allows their function wherein they are responsible for exchanging nutrients, carbon dioxide, getting carbon dioxide, expelling the oxygen into your tissues. So the next topic for discussion is the most common sites for venipuncture. Especially in our case, medical technology, this is very important for you since in your next SEM PMLS2, you will be introduced already on how to um, collect blood. The most common site for venipuncture is in the antecubital area. Antecubital area is located at the bend of the elbow, also called your antecubital fossa, this one. Right? The antecubital means in front of the elbow. Your fossa means a shallow or depression. So your antecubital fossa is a shallow depression in the arm that is anterior or in front and below that bends or the bend of the elbow. If the it is the first choice to locate this is the first choice where you will locate veins for venipuncture because several major arm veins lie close to the surface in this area, making them relatively easy to locate and penetrate with a needle. So this is the most easiest part where you can collect veins, right? These major superficial veins are referred as your antecubital veins. Chemical arrangement of antecubital veins varies slightly from person to person. However, there are two basic vein arrangement refers to as H and M shaped pattern. So we have the different patterns. We have H pattern here, this one, and we have M pattern here. So these are the three veins that is very common where we collect deoxygenated blood. We have your right median cubital, your right cephalic, and right basilic. Last choice po ang ating basilic because it is closer to nerve endings, therefore it is very painful. Median cubital is the first choice, second choice is your cephalic, and then third choice and last choice, which the most common vein to be avoided is your basilic vein. The H-shaped venous distribution pattern is displayed by approximately 70% of the population and includes the median cubital vein, the cephalic vein, and the basilic vein. Your median cubital vein is located near the center of the antecubital area. It is the most preferred vein for venipuncture in the H-shaped pattern. It is typically larger, closer to the surface, and is better anchored. When we say anchored, it stays in place and more stationary than the other veins, making it easiest and least painful to puncture and least likely to create a bruise. The cephalic vein, located in the lateral aspect of the antecubital area, is the second choice vein for venipuncture in the H-shaped pattern. It is often harder to palpate than the median cubital but is fairly well anchored. But compared to the median, of course, the median cubital is the most anchored one. And often the only vein that can be palpated in obese patients. So for obese patient, if we cannot feel the median cubital vein, we go to your cephalic vein. Okay, and lastly, your basilic vein, a large vein that is located in the medial aspect near the midline of the antecubital area. So it is the last choice vein for venipuncture in either venous distribution pattern. It is generally easy to palpate, but it is not as well anchored and rolls more easily. Increases also the possibility of accidental puncture of the anterior or posterior branch of the medial cutaneous nerve, which is a major nerve of the arm, or the brachial artery, both of which commonly underlie this area. Punctures in this area are also tend to be more painful. So in summary, this is your medial antecubital. This is the most preferred vein. For the cephalic, it is here. For your basilic, this one, right? But again, we prefer the median. Second is the cephalic, last is the basilic. Last is the basilic because in this area, this is where you can find the artery and the nerve. When you hit the nerve kasi, it can cause severe pain that sometimes will lead to decreased movement of the arms if you injure that nerve, okay? Next is the M-shaped antecubital veins. The veins that form the M-shaped veins distributes pattern include the cephalic median vein, median cephalic vein, median basilic, and the basilic vein. So, madami po siya. Median vein, also called the intermediate antebrachial vein, is the first choice for venipuncture, almost the same with the H shape, right? Your median cephalic, also called the intermediate cephalic vein, second choice, same through with your H, and then same through with your H also. The median basilic is the last choice because again of the different nerves and arteries that is located near the basilic vein. When we cannot collect from the antecubital fossa because of the potential for significant medical complications such as your phlebitis or your infection during phlebotomy or thrombosis, formation of clots, veins of the leg, ankle, and foot must not be used for venipuncture without the permission from the patient's physician, especially when they are diabetic. We never collect, or we, as much as possible, um, if we cannot really collect and the foot is the only choice, we must tell the physicians because diabetic patients, they do not heal their cuts easily. So when we puncture there at that side, there is a higher chances of infection, right? Arteries, they are not used for routine blood collections because arterial puncture requires special training to be performed. This is usually specimens for arterial blood gas, hindi po medtech ang nagkukulik noon, kundi respiratory therapists, di ba? Hindi po tayo nagkukulik. There are other veins also that we can use, the dorsal metacarpal veins or yung doon po sa ating near the wrist and the um, veins that run down the middle of the hand. We can also collect again from leg, ankles, and foot, but again with supervision of the physicians. Last topic is the blood. So the blood is a connective tissue that is composed of a liquid extracellular matrix that called blood plasma that dissolves and suspends various cells in fragments. Right? It is slightly alkaline with a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. The color of the blood depends on its oxygen saturation. Again, bright red with oxygen, dark red deoxygenated or without oxygen. An average adult has a total blood volume of 5 to 6 liter, which constitutes 24% of extracellular fluid and 8% of the body's mass. Please remember that there's a difference between total blood volume of males and females due to the difference in body size. So as you can see here, this is the components of our blood. When we centrifuge it or pagpapaikutin natin doon sa ating centrifugator or centrifuge, it will separate into parts. So 55% is the plasma, and then 45% is the formed elements, which is composed of your red blood cell and the buffy coat. Yung buffy coat po dyan, yung napakanipis na yan, na parang white na yan, dyan po nakakontain ang ating white blood cells and our platelets. Okay? So what is the function of blood? Transport of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, hormones, heat, and waste. It regulates the pH, body temperature and water contents of your cell. Also, it protects us against blood loss through clotting, that is the function of your platelets, and against disease through phagocytic white blood cells and proteins such as your antibodies, your interferons, and the complement that is found in your blood. So there are different types of blood specimen. We have arterial blood composition, that is from your arteries. This is for blood gas evaluation. We also have venous blood composition. They have different, although they contain same substances but different in amount. So magkaiba po yung amount ng glucose, for example, na nakikita sa artery, and yung amount ng glucose na nakikita sa venous. Either it is higher or lower, right? For venous blood composition, yun po yung ating kinokollect. For medtechs, we usually get venous blood. We rarely use arterial blood. Our venous blood is affected by metabolic activities of the tissue. Also, it is differs most from arterial blood in its lower oxygen content. But chloride, glucose, pH, carbon dioxide, lactic acid, and ammonia levels may also differ. Impaired blood flow can affect other analytes. Also, we have capillary blood that we get from our capillaries through finger puncture. So, capillary blood contains arterial mixture of arterial and venous blood plus tissue fluid. Please always remember tissue fluid because it enters the capillary under pressure. So, when we press and press the fingers, there is an increased contamination of tissue fluid. So, your arterial blood is from your arteries, your venous blood is from your venous, and your capillary blood is of course from your capillaries through collection from your fingertips, earlobes, or in the palms of our feet for or foot for the newborn babies. So your whole blood, when we centrifuge it, will be divided into your plasma and form elements. Your plasma contains water, of course, as 91.5%, the major constituent of blood. Also, it acts as a solvent and suspending medium, right? Next is your plasma proteins, which is composed of albumin, globulin, fibrinogen, and other proteins. It is responsible for osmotic pressure, major contributor to blood viscosity, and also it transport hormones, fatty acids, and calcium, and help regulates blood pH. Also, we have other solutes like your electrolytes, your nutrients, gases, regulatory substances, and the waste products that is found in our blood. The other part of your blood is of your whole blood when centrifuge is your formed elements. Your red blood cells is the packed red blood cells that we see there. Of course, their function is for transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our body. And also um it is the substance that creates the red color in our blood. In our Buffy coat, we can find our platelets and WBCs. Our platelets, their function, number one function is for clotting. It is our thrombocytes and they help for clotting. Their function is for clotting. And lastly, we have your white blood cells, your neutrophil, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Your white blood cells is divided into two groups, your granular leukocytes and agranular leukocytes. Granular with granules, agranular without granules. Your granular leukocytes are your neutrophil, eosinophil, and basophil. Your neutrophil, number one function, phagocytosis, destruction of bacterial infection. Your eosinophil, it combats effect of your histamine in allergic reactions and in parasitic infections. Your basophils, they liberate heparin, histamine, and serotonin for allergic responses. So again, neutrophil, phagocytic, bacterial. Eosinophil is for parasitic and allergic. And your basophil mainly for allergic reaction. Your agranular leukocytes is made up by your lymphocyte and monocyte. Lymphocyte mediates immune response. They are responsible for producing your antibodies, lymphocytes. And then your monocytes, phagocyte also, they are for phagocytosis. They are your wandering macrophages. They are known because they are the one that is going around, diba? We have different phagocytes in the different parts of the body, like in our bone, we have your osteoclast. So that is an example of your monocyte. Okay, for more further discussed portions, you please refer to your modules, manuals, and also your additional notes for cardiovascular system, the blood vessels in the blood. Anything that I did not discuss but is present in your module in the additional notes is still part of the quiz and the exam, right? So again, anything that is not discussed but is present in your module and additional notes is still part of the quiz, the exam, of course. And you will have your quiz on Monday and Tuesday. Monday for the MWF classes and Tuesday for the TTHS classes. So thank you for listening, and you will have your quiz next meeting.